Hello, and welcome to AI News That You Should Know About. I'm your host, Ashley Coffey.
And I'm Daniel Hill. Every week, in about 14 minutes, we cover all the AI news stories that you need to know about. This week, we'll be talking about ChatGPT's agent that casually clicks through a I am not a robot verification test, YouTube identifying and restricting minors' accounts using AI, Amazon funding a streaming service that lets you use AI to make your own TV shows, and Microsoft's list of jobs most likely and least likely to be replaced by AI.
All right, lots to talk about this week, so let's get to it. First up, we've got ChatGPT agent casually clicks through I am not a robot verification test. We all know those tests that are so inconvenient that ask you to click on all the bicycles or all of the ladders, and you're like, do I need to click on the small one that has like maybe a little thing? Well, anyways, ChatGPT has overcome that, which is a significant leap in technology progression because it means that we're able to do agentic actions in virtual environments, which is what ChatGPT is doing with this. It's mind blowing because it can click itself. I'm very interested to see where OpenAI goes with their rush to try to create a browser that has this functionality really baked into it. And I've been using something called Comet by Perplexity, which has a similar agentic model baked in. And I've been loving it. It's been blowing my mind. And for those that are listening that are like, what the heck's an agent? Agents are basically the ability to give something a task and for it to perform that task, especially when it involves actions such as clicking or moving things. So we're now progressing into that with the release of ChatGPT or OpenAI's agentic model, which combines the operator and the research model together. And yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what companies come up with next to mitigate this now that chatbots can overcome the test of am I a robot or not? What are your thoughts of this, Daniel?
I don't think I quite understand this story because I have understood that there have been bots that could take action on websites, clicking different things, pretending to be a human for a long time. I think of every time I buy tickets on Ticketmaster and how many people are running bot farms so they can buy tickets and sell them for a higher price as scalpers. So, how is that different from what people have been able to do in the past using bots?
It now democratizes the need for technical knowledge to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a fair point.
So I no longer have to like buy a developer or whatever. I can easily just tell it what to do and it will do it. So the ability to just articulate that and for the machine to just try to translate that for you is where the value is there.
Now, do you think this will lead to the requirements to prove that you're not a bot becoming that much harder? Are we going to be playing a cat and mouse game here?
I don't know, but I have learned that when it looks for that, it's not really looking to see are you matching. It's looking to at your cursor, a movement to see like are you a bot or not. So I don't, that has never been sophisticated to begin with. And it's actually become something different than what it originally started out as. If you listen to the How I Built This podcast, the episode with Duolingo, they talk about that a little bit. I won't digress into that, but it's basically a large digital archiving project that's been open sourced through CAPTCHA. But I think we'll see something different, maybe a two-factor authentication that's a little bit more sophisticated. I'm not quite sure.
Interesting. As someone who often struggles with captchas where I keep getting asked over and over to identify which are the staircases or which are the motorcycles, and you start to think that maybe you're losing your mind because you've done it what you think is successfully 3 or 4 times and you still haven't gotten through. In that case, having an OpenAI agent do that for me sounds wonderful. I'm all for that.
Yeah. Anything to save us time, right? All right. Next up, we've got YouTube will identify and restrict minors' accounts with AI. And this is a big one because next month, YouTube will start using an account's age and activity to determine if it belongs to someone under 18. What does this headline tell me? This headline tells me they're using AI algorithms to determine based on content views, based on keyword searches, and different types of action a user may take in their account to give signals as how old they are or what age range they might be in. That is fascinating to me. This is the first we're seeing. We're going to see more of this in the beginning or in the future. But I'm glad that YouTube is starting to take a little bit more restriction because yes, it's great, and it's also a little bit of a wild west. So, anything that we can do to protect minors, especially those that are still in the developmental stages of their brain growing, the better, especially in this rapidly changing world. What are your thoughts, Daniel?
So, as I understand it, YouTube is doing this for only people who haven't marked that they are older than 18. If you haven't put your age into YouTube yet, that's from my understanding of this. And if YouTube gets it wrong and you actually are over 18, but it thinks you are not, you can put in your government ID, enter a credit card, some other form of verification in order to get past that. So, that sort of says to me that YouTube knows they may make mistakes in doing this, but they are giving a way out. And so I give YouTube credit because keeping teens, younger kids safe on these platforms is really important. Making sure that you're categorizing content that only they're seeing that's age appropriate is it makes a lot of sense, especially how you advertise to teens or even younger people. So proud to see YouTube taking some of these steps.
But also, I do think it also reduces their liability in the long run by doing this. So they're using automation to their advantage for the mutual benefit.
Completely agree.
All right.
So we are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be talking about Amazon funding a streaming service that lets you use AI to make your own TV shows, and Microsoft releasing a list of jobs most and least likely to be replaced by AI. Stick around. Welcome back. We're continuing with our top AI news stories that you need to know about. And the next up, Amazon has just funded a streamer that lets you use AI to make your own TV shows. Here's the concept. Fable Studios, which is a startup, has raised funding from Amazon for Showrunner, which is its AI streaming platform, and it's opening up to users today. It lets subscribers who pay a certain amount per month, $10 up to $40 per month for credits, create their own animated shows or build on others' existing intellectual property by doing things like inserting themselves as characters into a show or adding a scene. This is a really interesting concept because when you think about the IP level, if you were to include, for instance, some of the Disney properties, you could make your own Star Wars episode, movie, world, insert yourself in there, combine with other characters from other intellectual properties. And I think there's so much opportunity there. Sure, the content might not be great, but just the ability to add yourself or your friends as characters into TV shows that you might already be watching is a great creative way to make new content. And also, if you have, say, a younger family member or a grandchild, and you can insert them into their own shows, why wouldn't they watch that? So I think there's a lot of interesting things that you can do here potentially. And there are also plans to pay the intellectual property owners for that content that gets used. So Disney would get a cut of X percent every time I made a video using a Star Wars character or whatever. I think there is a lot of opportunity here. What do you think, Ashley?
I'm I'm so glad you pulled this headline, and I kind of like that we were talking about this earlier because I get a fresh first reaction to it. And my first reaction is, what? I think it's cool, but let me take a step back from like the technical perspective. Is one, I want to know how much they invested in, which
I
I'm sure I
didn't
could look at that.
No, I didn't see that a specific number. It says the company just raised undisclosed funding from Amazon. So I didn't see a number yet,
Interesting.
but I'm sure it's in the millions or if not billions category.
Yeah, yeah, and it reminds me of the like the baby filters that were really popular a few weeks ago. Remember, like the podcast baby filters? You know, that kind of started a trend where people started seeing something like this that's possible. Because I see what they're getting at is, hey, wouldn't you want to have user generated content with your IP? Like that's a no brainer. But knowing what I know about Lucasfilms and how they maintain the quality of their properties, I highly doubt they would ever get their IP to a place where like a general user could put anything with it. I know Vicky Dobbs, who's the VP of immersive content at Lucasfilms. I heard her speak at a conference in June of this year, and they're actually working on something that's more of a immersive world building, that's more of that AR, less of user generated content, but they're actually going so far as to experiment with it on their own campus before they even launch any kind of betas to the public because they want to get it right, because they know that they owe it to their fan base to get it right, which I appreciate that they're so thoughtful of that. So if they're able to secure IP rights like that, awesome. But I think that's the main value of the platform alone. I don't know if there's anything else there that would make it valuable as a company, but it's cool.
I think just the fact that these conversations are happening and have potential to happen and Amazon is investing shows that this is the democratization of content creation for historically, okay, we can do small things at home on a small scale, but to be able to use intellectual property to make things, I love that idea.
Yes, yeah. It takes me back to the Studio Ghibli wave that came out from after you were able to upload video or photos into ChatGPT and say, "Hey, make this Studio Ghibli style," and all of a sudden you got it. The IP of a creator and artist is now being used to stylize a photo of yourself, which to me as a user, that's cool. But if you're an artist and you're like, "Oh my God, IP," it brings us into this existential crisis. But there's really never going to be a black and white scenario here in the world of IP and AI.
That's true. Yes. And if you didn't want your IP used that way, of course, there should be protections in place so that that doesn't happen. Absolutely.
Yeah, but pretty cool. I'll be interested to see where this goes.
Let's move on to our last story. Microsoft releasing a list of jobs most and least likely to be replaced by AI. I think this is a really important topic because what jobs would you recommend to kids today who are graduating high school, entering college, leaving college, and not sure what to do next? I've struggled with that question and I've been thinking about it a lot for myself. Where do I want to go career wise? What makes sense to invest time and energy in that will still be relevant 5 years from now or 10 years from now? And the list that Microsoft gave, first, number one, is based on their conversations with Copilot and Copilot users. And second, only relate to large language models, only LLMs. So we're not talking about robotics or anything like that for these conversations. So the list of jobs that are most likely to not be needed going forward: interpreters and translators, other occupations like writing and editing, sales, customer service, programming, historians, writers and authors, brokerage clerks, political scientists, reporters and journalists, mathematicians, proofreaders, editors, PR specialists, and so on. They have a huge graph. We'll link to it in the show notes where you can check out the study. It's directly from Cornell University. Conversely, the least impacted occupations, and I think this is where it makes sense to at least invest time and energy researching if you're thinking of a career path or looking to change your career path. This, I think, is the key part. They think that occupations that require physically working with people would be least impacted. So, nursing assistants, massage therapists. They also cite the category of operating or monitoring machinery. So, like a water treatment plant or systems operator, a pile driver operator, truck or tractor operators, and other manual labor like dishwashers, roofers, maids, and housekeeping cleaners. Now, all of those things, again, are strictly based on how LLMs, large language models, will impact the workforce. We're not talking about robotics, right? I might say on this list, truck driver, that sounds good. Sounds like Microsoft doesn't think that job is going to be replaced anytime soon. Well, robotics could impact that down the line. It's unclear at this point. It's going to happen at some point, but when? So, taking that Microsoft study with a grain of salt. Ashley, what do you think about this? It's a big one for sure.
Thank you for pulling this. I think it's really important to talk about, but thank you for prefacing what their framework was for getting this data together. And it's important to remind everyone that it's framed on Copilot use, right? So just Microsoft. So here's what I think. I'm looking at this list here, and I can understand interpreters and translators. That's understandable. The clerking and the programming, completely understand that because those are things that could be automated. Where I see historians, writers, authors, and CNC tool programmers, it's a highly specific thing. Like to know how to use a CNC tool, what? I'm very curious why they put that there. But proofreaders, editors, PR specialists, I think there's something that we're missing here. It's like that human in the loop aspect. Like, yes, it's going to replace some of this, but you're still going to need a person to double check its work before it goes live. So something to be said there. is my thoughts. And it reminds me of that scene in Interstellar where, yeah, there's something in the school office and they're like, we don't need more scientists, we need more farmers, we need more food. That kind of reminds me of what I'm seeing here, kind of. What about you? What do you think?
I think the occupations that do require physically working with people are going to be safe for the immediate future, right? And I think
Yes.
home healthcare, healthcare in general, that person to person interaction is going to be a key requirement. Physical therapy, I also think, is something that would be a person to person kind of interaction. So I think those are safe for the immediate future, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I think the world will look very different. So it's really hard to predict what jobs will still be critically important then.
I think product managers are going to be incredibly important because you need to be able to talk between your your dev team and the people that want to build the tool. Like that's I think that human aspect in the technology pipeline is very undervalued.
Are you saying that because I'm a product manager? Thank you. I feel very
No,
good about that.
but people don't realize how valuable that role is and how much of a unique skill set it requires to be able to bridge the gap between two different languages of two different people that have two different frames of thinking.
Yes, I'm glad to hear you say that because I have often been discouraged that AI will soon replace all the product managers. So thank you for saying that.
No. Yeah, I feel like you've got good job security. We're at least, I would say, 10 years out for an immediate term of any of that being potentially gone.
That makes me feel a lot better. Well, that is it for our AI news that you should know about this week. You can find links to everything we've discussed in the show notes, and you can connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear what you think of the show, how we can improve it, any and all feedback. You can find me on Instagram at Daniel Hill Media on Instagram, Threads, and YouTube.
And again, thank you for listening to today's episode of AI News That You Should Know About. If you want more tech talk than today, you can find me on Instagram at Ashley R. Coffee. And you can find my other podcast, Coffee and Code, wherever you get your podcasts. But if you're interested in taking the next step of implementing AI in your business or really don't know where to start with analyzing your tech stack, reach out to me. I run Coffee and Consult, a technology consulting firm dedicated to helping small and medium sized businesses leverage tech for efficiency. So, would love to hear from you. Please reach out.
Thank you for listening, and be sure to come back next week for more AI news that you should know about.